Hey guys, so I wanted to share another story from the Zen tradition. Again, all of these stories were translated or collected by Paul Reps in this book, Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. It's an excellent collection of Zen short stories and other spiritual material. I can highly recommend it. The stories are relatively short. It's something you could keep on your nightstand and do a little light reading before bed. So like many spiritual traditions, the Zen tradition often teaches with parables or stories, little short stories. And oftentimes these stories, well, I'll say really always, they're not really meant for your mind. They're not really meant for you to over intellectualize or try and understand. But having intellectually trying to understand, they're sort of meant to hit deeper in your gut or your heart somewhere, and they bring a response from a deeper part of ourselves. Having said that, I'll try my best to sort of explain this. As I understand it today, our understandings of these stories can often shift or change as our own spiritual perspective deepens, and I by no means claim to be finished with my journey or my deepening of my understanding. My understanding is that it can't be exhausted. We can always understand things on a deeper, more profound level. Okay, so this is called Gutei's finger, and this is meant to contrast the last three stories that I shared. If you haven't seen them, go back and look at the other 10-minute talks that I posted that are all three about thievery and stealing. And in each of those stories, the Zen master involved does not deal with the thievery or the stealing in the way that we might expect, not in the way that our culture would encourage. We would tend to want to punish someone who's stealing, or maybe do violence to them. But we find is that what they did is they respond compassionately. So this story I want to share because this is a very different face of compassion. What is compassion? Do we really know what compassion is? Those of you who've been on the Zen retreat with me over the winter, we've been doing this for many years now. I share in that retreat a story, or not a story, but a text. And in that text, the teacher talks about real Buddhist compassion. And I've also mentioned before that Trungpa Rinpoche calls what many of us consider compassion grandmother's love. And what he's doing there is, when you scrape your knee and your grandmother comes over, oh honey, baby, are you okay? Do you want me to kiss it, make it better? Many of us think this is what compassion is. But this story is going to outline a very different form of compassion, okay? Now it's very important to keep an open mind and remember that this is not meant to be overly intellectualized. I also want to remind you that spiritual teaching is not about our conventional view. It is not designed or meant to reinforce our social conditioning, at least not this kind of spiritual teaching. Okay, if anything, this is supposed to shock us out of our normal way of thinking. Okay, so the last three stories, again, what do we expect the thief to do? We expect them, if they get caught, to be punished. Instead, they are forgiven. The events are ignored or even covered up in one instance. All right, so this is, again, not what we conventionally expect. And this is what we need from our spirituality. If spirituality is just going to reinforce what we already think and what we already believe, then it's not really helping us. It needs to reach deeper inside and elicit something from a deeper place within us, a deeper truth, a more profound truth. Okay? Gutei's finger. Gutei raised his finger whenever he was asked a question about Zen. A boy attendant began to imitate him in this way. When anyone asked the boy what his master had preached about, the boy would raise his finger. Gutei heard about the boy's mischief. He seized him and cut off his finger. right? Many of us are like, oh my God, child abuse. Is this compassion? Is this compassion in action? Violence? Many of us in yoga, we learn about ahimsa, nonviolence, all this kind of thing. Well, where does this fit into that? The boy cried and ran away. Gutei called and the boy stopped. When the boy turned his head to Gutei, Gutei raised up his own finger. In that instant, the boy was enlightened. When Gutei was about to pass from this world, he gathered his monks around him. He said, I attained my finger Zen from my teacher Tenryu, and in my whole life I could not exhaust it. Then he passed away. All right, so what's going on in this story? Well, another story you should know about, or a saying that comes from the Zen tradition, is when someone points to the moon, you should look at the moon and not the finger. So, what is the significance of cutting off the finger? If we are distracted by the finger, if we're distracted by the words, if you are disturbed by this story, okay, oh, well, Zen masters shouldn't cut off fingers. You are looking at the finger and not the moon. So what does the Zen master do? He removes the distraction. He takes away the finger. Now, whether this is a true story or not, who knows? One of my teachers once said, and he was quoting someone else, that a myth, and these can be thought of as mythical stories, all right? Again, they may be true, they might not. It doesn't matter, okay? This isn't a factual record, and people often get in this problem with the Bible as they try and prove that the Bible is true. It doesn't matter if it's true or not, okay? It doesn't matter if it's true or not. What is it eliciting from us? What is it bringing up within us? So, removing this finger, we're removing that distraction. We're pointing at the moon. We want to see the moon. If I get upset about this story, if I get upset about what my teacher said or did or something like that, I'm focusing on the finger and I'm not focusing on the moon. Okay, what is the moon? The moon is our true nature, our Buddha nature. It could be called spirit. It could be called Christ consciousness. It could be called God. True spiritual teaching is not trying to teach us right from wrong in a conventional sense, because I think most of us could agree that grabbing people's fingers and cutting them off is not a good thing to do. I haven't found a tradition where they say, oh yeah, do that. I think in the Muslim tradition that is condoned as a way of dealing with thievery, but we've already looked at thievery in the Zen tradition. Did you hear about anyone's finger getting cut off in response to that? Instead, this boy quite innocently is doing this. What does your teacher teach? He does this, but he doesn't understand what the teaching is really about. He's not actually pointing to the moon when he does this, unlike his teacher. Now again, if we think just physically, well, he's doing the same thing his teacher does. But in the Zen tradition, it is said that Zen is a non-verbal transmission from the teacher to the student. Non-verbal. Okay, this might be said to be non-verbal, but it's not in the finger either, is it? So the teaching is beyond the finger, it's beyond the words. Now this, if you read the story carefully, you hear or you understand that the boy was enlightened after Gutei did this to him. This is true compassion. This is why so many of my teachers, including teachers like Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie, who are somewhat popular, when someone gets diagnosed with a terminal illness, they usually interpret this or see this as a blessing, not a curse, because it's an opportunity for us to wake up. So it is the universe's way of showing compassion. a fierce compassion, okay? And compassion can be very fierce, and I want you to understand that after those last three stories where we maybe begin to think that, oh, well, compassion is just, forgiving people who make mistakes and things like that. Yes, that can be a face of compassion, but compassion can also be quite fierce. If we're confused, compassion can come in like this, take away the confusion. And that confusion, if it's our body, then maybe life comes in and takes away our body. All right, so I want you to meditate on this and think about this. Don't go to any snap judgments, okay? Notice your own reactions to this story. Notice your own assumptions about right and wrong and good behavior and how we should be taught, okay? I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer here. I'm asking you to notice yourself. Notice your own reactions. All right, everyone. Namaste.